Item 6 then is members' questions. Could I ask that members who wish to ask supplementary questions stand up and state supplementary, and also that any supplementary questions are put forward clearly, briefly, and I'm going to also add the word singly. In other words, just the one supplemental, not a whole raft. Question number 1, Councillor Osborne.
Question number 1 to the leader, please.
Mr. Mayor, I thank Councillor Osborne for his question, and the answer is really as set out in the circulated answers.
Councillor Osborne.
Does the leader not even concede that the fact that the council has been sluggish in its restructuring, despite opposition urgings, we've paid a price for that? We've been unable to save as much money as we might have done at an earlier stage.
I thank Councillor Osborne for his supplement. I seem to recall that Councillor Osborne was the opposition spokesman on leisure and amenities, OBU and Scrutiny Committee as it was, and presumably he remembers that that department is no more. And so therefore that was first part of the restructuring, and he obviously has forgotten that this is not something that happened overnight or suddenly. It has been going on for some time. But the fact that his memory is short, I can understand why he has come to the conclusions he has.
Supplementary, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Maxwell Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would the leader agree with me that, following on from what he said, it is disappointing that it's taken more than 2 years for the opposition to recognise that one department is no longer in existence, and also that it is disappointing that it has taken the opposition until the full council meeting to express its righteous indignation over the restructuring of departments, and share with me the disappointment that more effort wasn't made during the committee cycles to voice their views then.
I thank Councillor Maxwell Scott for his supplementary. I really am at a loss to understand where opposition stands on this issue of either having to, the necessity of having to make budget reduction, because on that they generally are budget deficit deniers. I fail to understand where they stand on individual budget reductions, because they generally support or abstain, and then eventually when it comes to setting a budget, they wish that they hadn't. And I fail to understand why they have actually not engaged in the proper process of scrutinizing the restructuring proposals, but resort to grandstanding.
Before we move on, I noticed 1 or 2 people in the public gallery. Are you a little bit lost? Have you got copies of these questions? You have, great. Then you're not lost. Good. Councillor Osborne.
Question number 2 to the leader, please.
Thank Councillor Osborne for his question. And the two bits I want to pick up. One is, of course, that at the bottom of the answer, there is indeed sort of good news in that we have been able to persuade the current providers of nursery education in 1 o'clock clubs, centres, to provide the additional places that we are talking about. So that is certainly a piece of good news. And the rest of the answer is as printed.
Councillor Osborne.
Can I ask the leader, will those who it appears will be providing early education places, either at their existing levels or at an increased level in the 1 o'clock centres, will include in their provision stay and play sessions for all? And if so, will there be any charges for this provision?
Well, Councillor Osborne is going to have to wait till the next cycle when there is a further review of exactly what is going to be provided and how we are going to be providing it. Now, just sort of go back to his, the drafting of his question, and he uses the word resort to childminders, spot purchase of private nurseries and so on. I just make it very plain to him that on this side we don't think that this is a resort of the last choice, as it were. This is part of the choice menu. We offer to parents with young children a whole variety of ways in which they can make provisions for childminding and their children's education, as to suits both their lifestyles, their pocket, and so on. So this party believes in choice and widening the choice as far as possible and as much as possible.
Councillor Nadler.
Question number 3 to the leader.
I thank Councillor Nadler for her question, and it is in some ways timely, since the news of Mrs. Thatcher's death that we should, at the first immediate meeting after that, recognize the inspiration she gave to both this current council and its predecessor councils in shaping Wandsworth and Wandsworth's appeal to its residents, which has stood us and them in good stead, much inspired by the clarity of her vision, which this council and its previous members have embraced.
Supplementary.
Councillor Grimston.
I wonder if the leader would agree with this quote about Margaret Thatcher. She was a towering figure, a global figure, who made a vast impact, and her reputation is rightly immensely high. The best test of a political leader is to do some of the changes they make, is to ask, do some of the changes they make stand the test of time? I think the trade union framework, the privatisation of industries, and some of the things she did in relation to tax and spending, this is now part of the common political consensus now. Does the leader agree with that? And if so, might this be the first time that he actually has agreed with anything Tony Blair has said?
It probably is the first time that I would be in agreement with the former Prime Minister. But I also noticed a little bit of news last week, I think it was, that he is subscribing to a fund to set up some Margaret Thatcher scholarships at an Oxford college. Well, he's obviously able to make that contribution because he is the beneficiary of the ways in which Mrs. Thatcher changed both this country and its economy. I also say that one of the basic messages that one takes from her premiership and her leadership of the Conservative Party was never spend money that you haven't got. It's a message that only lasted as long as Conservatives were in power, and the successive administrations led by Blair or Brown both seem to have forgotten that very clear and very simple message.
Councillor Fairbrother.
The leader.
I thank Councillor Fairbrother for his question. Interesting take on this. I mean, he fears that the community toilet scheme may not continue when the £900 annual fee is no more. My view about local business community is that local business communities are part of our community. They rely on the community for their custom, they rely on the community for their livelihood, and I would have thought that every businessman would want to embrace that community and offer assistance when they need it. The idea that people need to be paid to be nice to other people seems to be alien to us. Well, certainly is alien to us, but seems to be so completely unrecognized by the party opposite.
Councillor Fairbrother.
I thank the leader for his answer. Sort of a two-part question, really. The answer is really there is the hope that businesses will keep going with the scheme rather than any factual base to it. And I think the question I was going to ask is, should we not have some facts obtained at reasonable cost, like a small random sample, for example, to back up the hope that's expressed? And secondly, I agree that shops, businesses ought to be sort of playing their part, but I note if I'm walking around Tooting, and a question to the leader here, that quite a few shops and public houses and coffee shops make it very plain the toilets are only for use for customers, no one else.
I suspect, just turning to the last part of his supplementary, I suspect that there are places in Wandsworth or elsewhere where shops will put such a notice actually to deter street drinkers. It is not there, in my view, to deter genuine customers. I think shops do genuinely like nice customers and future and past customers, but clearly they don't want a street drinker using their facilities, and neither do we want them to be using our streets for that. So I can understand where that comes from, but I think his fear that this is almost some sort of universal ban on customers of shops using their facilities, I think is unfounded. As for whether we should spend some money and do a sample survey and such like, well, one of the things that is quite going back to spending money you don't have, another message Mrs. Thatcher also said, don't spend other people's money without care. And this is a sort of an example of spending other people's money without care. We are, as local ward members, are in a very good position to know if this is becoming a problem. We, as a council, engage with the business community on a regular basis, and the EDO is in direct contact with an awful lot of businesses. If this is going to be a problem, we will find out between either the official workings of the council or through our leadership of our local authority, our local wards. And I am sure the Councillor Fairbrother was an excellent Affairs Guide member. We'll find out sooner than many others might do.
Second supplementary.
Councillor Mrs Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does the leader share my disappointment that in these straitened times, yet again, the opposition has voted against a sensible budget saving? And will he urge the Thamesfield councillors to try and persuade the aptly named Lulu's Cafe in Leaders Gardens to remain in the scheme?
I'm sure the three Thamesfield councillors heard what you say, and I am sure that they will play their role as community leaders in Thamesfield and do exactly what you ask them to. As for your disappointment with the opposition's view about any budget savings, well, I did say earlier that they don't seem to actually have any consistency about it. They deny that there is a need to reduce budgets, and when they do half accept it, they deny the individual measures or abstain on it, and then subsequently find ways of spending the money that they haven't saved.
Councillor Nadelli.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question number 5 to the leader.
I thank Councillor Nadelli for her question. I'm particularly proud that we are actually getting to the point where the delivery of the Northern Line extension is becoming increasingly a reality. This is a milestone in that delivery program that we have reached. It is on schedule. That is what TfL promised, that they would put the Transport Works Act application in April. That is what they have done. And clearly the remaining figures of start on site in 2015 is something that we can bank on. What, of course, the Northern Line will do is bring untold job and housing opportunities in Nine Elms area for our residents. Not only just ours, but of course people from Lambeth too will benefit from this. And this is, nonetheless, the tower process is tricky because it is effectively a parliamentary planning process, parliamentary planning applications type of process. And so there is much more work to be done in persuading any objectors that there might be that this is in the best interest of the two boroughs, but also in the wider interest of London as a whole, because this will add enormous transport capacity, bringing an otherwise forlorn area into the mainstream of central London economic zone.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree entirely with the leader that we should welcome the extension to Battersea, but to be really successful, this needs to be extended further to Clapham Junction. The reason that, and of course that is council policy, the reason that Canary Wharf has been so successful is that the Jubilee line doesn't just go to Canary Wharf, it goes on to Stratford, a major interchange. And the Battersea Nine Elms area would be even more successful were the Northern Line to be extended at the earliest opportunity, and hopefully before Crossrail 2 comes in another 20 years or so. So will the leader press TfL and others to extend it further at the earliest opportunity?
I thank Councillor Carpenter for his supplementary and makes an extraordinarily sensible point, one that actually we have embraced already. In welcoming Crossrail 2, we see the importance of Clapham Junction as a very important interchange, as well as virtually a London terminal in itself. We also, in our submission to the Mayor on his 2020 vision, talked about the need to link Clapham Junction into the wider network of both underground and overground. We have pressed the Mayor for the extension of the overground services at Clapham Junction, which incidentally are moving from 4 to 5 cars, further increasing the capacity of that station and its ability to link to all parts in London as well as the south of England. I think also very important to note is that in the planning of the Northern Line extension, the design does allow for the train not to end at a buffer, but it has an overrun with the capacity that should at a future point it become a higher priority in London plans, or government funding becomes available, or some other mechanism becomes available, that the overrun could carry on joining up Clapham Junction to the underground network. And if that happens, it will be an enormous, enormous boon to this borough.
Councillor Daly.
Question 6 to the Leader.
I thank Councillor Daly for his question, but I guess the Chief Executive may not. It's interesting, isn't it? And I said earlier about the party opposite knowing what to do with other people's money. And this is a classic example of it knowing what to do with other people's money. The answer is as it is.
Supplementary.
Councillor Daly.
I thank the Leader for his response, and particularly in his written response for drawing attention to the Hay report, which recommended that senior officers' pay was increased by 20%, and I think highlights how misguided this council is in continuing to commission a report that comes up with such ludicrous recommendations year on year. So firstly, I'd like to ask the Leader whether he'll commit to scrapping any more money being spent on that in future, and whether or not he will continue to work to reduce the pay of the senior officers, which, as he well knows, is inflated compared to other councils.
I thank Councillor Daly for his supplementary, but if I was a subscriber to a consumer protection organisation, the one thing that I would hope that the consumer protection organisation would do is to respect my contractual obligation and my employer's contractual obligations. The Hay scheme for senior officers is a contractual obligation between this council and senior officers. To talk about scrapping unilaterally a contractual obligation shows a height of irresponsibility. Clearly, what the answer shows that whatever Hay said, we have a very sober view about that report, and the 20% recommendation, their recommendation, was not accepted by this council and was reduced to 1%. So we do accept that this report said something which was undeliverable, but we came to a conclusion that was livable between us and our employees to whom we have a contract. But I just also say that the Hay scheme has served this council and its residents well. We have rewarded our staff well, but they have also in return more and more than matched in their contribution to this council beyond the call of duty. People will remember officers replying to emails on weekends and in the evenings long after they have left this council. That kind of commitment and dedication we've got from not only senior but many other staff in the council is a testament to how our relationship with our employees is an excellent one. It helps both this council, but it also in the long run actually helps our residents. It makes us resilient in providing services to our community, and for that our community is grateful.
Second supplementary. Councillor Belton.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask the Leader, without breaking any Hay agreements at all, could he deny that I have opposed increase in bonuses for senior officers for about 20 years, many of which have been embedded within subsequent salaries, and that when he talks about the figures that we have refused to support in terms of keeping council tax down or anything, that he would put in, say, £1.5 million a year that would have been saved if the majority of party had agreed with my position. Would he also not recognise that would he also not recognise that actually it was introduced in the first place as a retention policy? And yet this council has about the lowest turnover amongst senior staff ever. So much so that we're getting into a Queen's Park Rangers situation, relegated but with no way of finding what to do except the rather harsh measures that Mr. Martin's having to take with some people right now. All part of the incompetence of this administration over the last 10 years.
I thank Councillor Belton for his supplementary. it's interesting that the guffaws from colleagues on this side showed you exactly what they thought of your claim that the retention policy had not worked. Clearly, retention policy had worked. That in turn has made this council a success that it is. I mean, what we don't know is that what would have happened without this policy, and that is speculation, isn't it? But my contention would be that this policy has helped us capture the commitment of good, dedicated, solid officers who've stayed here longer and longer. And actually, we are the envy of many other authorities. Only this morning, I had a meeting with a leader of another local London borough who commented very, very favourably on the stability of this organisation, not only in its membership, council membership, but also in its senior staff. And that stability has been of enormous benefit, and Councillor Belton actually knows it, although his questions suggest that he denies that. As for his 20-year record, I can't vouch for it myself, because I certainly didn't sit in all the performance review meetings over the full 20 years. But the 4 years for which I did sit, it is true that he came, barely listened to the debate, made his motion that my motion is that you don't accept this more than X% increase, and can we now wrap it up? Because I know you're going to vote me down, and you know what I'm going to say. Can we wrap it up? That is true. You always said that, and I respect you for it. The honesty of saying, I've said my piece, and I know I'm going to lose the vote, and shall we just move on? So 4 of the 20 years I can say you did that. For the other 16 I can't comment on.
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm allowed a very brief point of personal explanation. Very brief.
Under which standing order would that be, Councillor Belton?
The one that allows personal explanations. I will be very brief. Mr. Mayor, I took part in those debates, a debate usually between the Chief Executive, the Director of Finance and 2 or 3 Tories. Having said it once, there was not much point in repeating it. With respect, I took as much part in that debate as anyone could have done.
Thank you very much, Councillor Belton. I was about to say that the time for questions to the Leader is now over.